Welcome to another edition of Politics and Right. My name is Egberto Willies, your host. Today, I'm honored to have, as usual, Tim Danahey. Tim is a good friend, former director at Coffee Party USA. He's what I call a community organizer in a special way. He had a radio show, the Tim Danahey Show, in which I tell you, he covered a lot of books, covered a lot of space, covered a lot of what's occurring in our body politics. I've always used Tim as an advisor, where I called a consummate. The words that I want to use is one who brings people together, which is what the Coffee Party was all about. Anyway, without further ado, my brother, Tim Danahey, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, Egberto, and it's always a delight to see you. You just have this energy about you that makes people want to go out and make things right.
Well, you know what, Tim? Let me tell you, I asked you for this interview after we were in touch, and you said, okay, what are we going to talk about? And I said, we're going to talk about it when we start talking, because again, I think what you represent you're in Pennsylvania right now. You used to be in Colorado. You're in Pennsylvania right now. You represent a lot of Americans. And I want to know how you are currently feeling. Let's not get into technicalities. How are you currently feeling about our country?
Egberto, you got to have faith, and you have to believe that, we make mistakes, and we've had this wonderful ability to correct ourselves. Let's hope that what you and I may perceive as a mistake with the forthcoming administration can be checked. But Egberto, you look at a couple of things, and there are signs that are favorable. We're not getting this complete subservience to the incoming president. There are people, whether it be budget or whether it be the economics of deportation, voices that you and I may have considered extreme at one point, all of a sudden are becoming voices of moderation, saying, wait a minute, are you sure this is what you want? Have you really looked at the consequences besides the political theatrics of it? And so you have to be encouraged that wiser heads may prevail, but I do not underestimate the struggle ahead of us.
I'm glad that you put it that way. You don't underestimate the struggle that's ahead of us right now. The rest of the world. Let's talk about the perspective from the rest of the world. The rest of the world saw the election of Donald Trump the first time as sort of an aberration. There were a whole lot more Americans who wanted the other person to be president than this president. There were 3 million Americans. It's an aberration of the Constitution that allows somebody who gets less than the popular vote to hold office. In as much as Donald Trump this time around didn't get to 50% of the votes, he did get more than his major challenger. And by that, then he won the popular vote. The rest of the world no longer sees it as a mistake of the American people, but as a part of our fabric. How do we handle that internationally? How you're a businessman, you have international, I imagine, accounts as well. How do we handle that?
Excellent question, Egberto. I think what we have to do is make sure that the gentleman who represents, and I say gentleman loosely, 50.5% or whatever his we also have to make certain that the other 49.5%. Let me
interrupt for one quick second, Tim, because I want to make sure that our audience get the right numbers across. He actually got less than 50% of the votes. He got 49.7 or so percent of the votes. The third parties plus Harris got over 50%. Just want to make sure we're on the same platform.
No, we are on the same platform. I was just doing a one-to-one comparison,
Right.
disregarding the
middle, the other,
the tools,
Right. Exactly.
But we have to make sure that there is a coherent and consistent and rational voice that's always heard in the case of these discussions. I once told you that if 4% of the people participated to the point of attending a rally across the country, 4% is the tipping point for, I don't want to be dramatic, but revolution, for changing policy. 4% scares politicians tremendously. And so can we muster the 4% to show up on an issue-based platform? I don't know. Do we have media outlets that allow us to be heard, the half? I hope so. But it's going to take a sustained effort, and now is not the time to be civilly or politically lazy.
Now, let me first of all commend you for something that you do. You pretty much support what you talk about in supporting independent media. You've always done that. But what we've seen in the media right now, the mainstream media, is from the ones that some would consider the left to those that are already there on the right to those in the middle. They've all been making their pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago to bow to Mr. President-elect. Likewise, we've even had, and I've done a couple of articles on these. Actually, I've done several articles on these, where we have certain large left of center type media organizations doing similar things, which seems to open the door for people like yourself and others to get on whatever platform that they haven't realized that. I don't know if you remember when we were both directors at the coffee party, we instituted a program called Be the Media, which means participation by all and ensuring that, that the media goes up, because we can't depend on a corporate driven media anymore. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes and no. Okay. Everybody responds to the dollars, and I'm going to bring this back to you as kind of a question for you also. But let's take a look at this Luigi Mangione situation and the public's reaction, which is fascinating, to say the least. Everybody abhors the violence, but there is this subtext of, well, I get it. I support it. I understand. And then for a brief period of time, there was this, 68,000 people, I believe that was a number that was bantered about, died due to rejected health care claims out of the 54 million subscribers for United Healthcare. And I think that sort of scares the CEOs in a way. But do you notice how the corporate media, since that event, has been talking about, how handsome he is, or now he's in the same prison as Combs or Pete, and some of the most ridiculous stuff. I have not seen a follow-up story investigating healthcare in the United States. That side isn't. But I have seen a lot of Liberty Mutual commercials. I have seen a lot of Progressive Insurance commercials. State Farm, Allstate, whatever. So I look at this, Egberto, is that the media will respond according to how many people view. Now, let's take MSNBC as an example. They are trying to rationalize their post-election viewership as a typical slump that occurs, an election burnout, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're whistling through the graveyard on that one. I personally have not watched it since then. I do have a degree of burnout, but I've lost confidence in the source because of the actions that are there. I must have confidence in the source. With you as an example, and with David K. Johnston and others similar, I look at that and say, I trust the source, and I can develop my thoughts accordingly. And you allow the discussion. Whereas, of course, Fox News is absurd. Really, there's no other word. It's not news. It's absurd. But MSNBC has taken the hit on this, and sad to see. So there's a void. So where do the people go to get their news at this point? I suspect that you're not wild about legacy media, the ABC, CBS, NBC. But it may be on a broad scale the best we got. How do we convert them? Maybe by influencing the advertisers. There was once a guy, and I'm sorry to rant on, but a guy named Ralph Churell about 50 years ago wrote a book, How to Complain. And he gave an example, a fascinating book, but he gave an example that Procter & Gamble at the time received, I think, 3 letters independently with the same comment about one of their products. And those 3 letters caused a complete corporate investigation. They respond. They really do respond. So the way to get the media to respond is perhaps we not be civilly lazy and we pursue the media or pursue the advertisers.
Right.
And what we buy says a lot. And sadly, in a dollar-driven country like ours, that might be initially the most effective manner we have.
Interestingly, Tim, if you take a listen to what you just said, makes a lot of sense. And it opens another question, right? The media is supposed to be the fourth estate. The media is supposed to put checks not only on government, but also checks on the corporation. And what you just pointed out, sadly, is true. If we want the media to report better, I think in a sort of way, what you've stated is that if their source of funding, which becomes that corporate sector, is unhappy with much of what they're saying, then they'll change. And while that is indirectly the will of the people, it's putting an extra burden on the people, don't you think?
It has to. Democracy is not for the lazy.
Right.
It just isn't. Benjamin Franklin's statement, you can say it, it's a republic if you can keep it.
You can keep it, yeah.
Right. It applies today as it did then. So the next step is we have to have not just, and I'm not good with social media. Trolling is whenever people get on just to provoke a fight or something like that, right? And so the trolls are worthless. Elevated discussion has a value, especially if the elevated discussion leads to individual thoughts and actions. The trolls are a waste of air and a waste of ink, and it's a place for people to remain anonymous and to
it cheapens the
challenge
debate.
What is.
It really cheapens the debate. And, let me give an example. I just wrote a newsletter, and, you have to give titles that sort of make somebody want to click on it. So I just interviewed a very smart guy, but he's straight up MAGA. But he is a smart guy. And then, I got all kind of pushback from the left, both at Daily Kos and other places. Why did you give this guy a platform, etc.? And I gave him a platform because he's a radio host like you were, Tim, but he also has something to say. People listen to him. And I wanted a civil conversation where people could hear him and hear me. Then I wrote an article about it. I mean, it didn't get the response that I thought I was going to get. A lot worse of a response from the left, but I didn't. Some actually thanked me for doing it. Now, interestingly, the 20-something percent, 30% of MAGA that are politics done right supporters actually asked me to bring him on again, and I did. I haven't released it yet, but I did. And interestingly, he said, "You are the first person, the first progressive that actually will accept to come into my program and laying out what you believe, and also that invite me and treats me civilly on your program." So, I mean, for the work that we've done this together quite a bit, Tim, in the space. Is that where we need to go?
It's where we need to go, but the algorithms at Facebook or Meta and X and presumably others favor the conflict. There's money in conflict. There's money in extremism because it coalesces various markets that are easy to reach. But the fascinating thing about what you do, Egberto, and casually I can talk with a MAGA person, and not on radio, of course, but when you talk with them, it astounds me at how much we have in common. We want to save Social Security, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we all do. We all think the healthcare system is bad, right? We all are very concerned about privatization, whether it be prisons or schools or water. What is the motivation if there's privatization? We all want voting rights, but yet somehow these have all become polarizing issues, and they're not. They're actually uniting issues. So whenever there's a forum like yours, I would like to see it promoted everywhere. What it does, it brings people together and isolates the issues, whereas mainstream media tends to enjoy the division and zoom on that. Much like I remember the Portland protests years ago.
Yes,
I think,
yes.
And the media says all these crazy people, and and so it polarized. There was a valid case. Perhaps it wasn't presented well. I don't know. The people who watch Fox News are terrified of murdering illegal immigrants, and that's not true. But forums like yours, we need more of them. And you know what else? We need bigger ones.
Yes.
And so that's what we need, Egberto. We have more in common than you said. Farm policy. We all agree with farm policy. We all agree that we can't deport 15 million undocumented immigrants or whatever at a cost of 1.5 trillion or something is being bantered about. We can't afford that. Let's stop the divisive conversation, and let's just say, okay, how do we make this work? How do we make it work for a fraction of the cost? We beef up the process of making people legal, make them report. That's if it has to be reported a month or two until their process of legal being here is achieved, so be it. Egberto, I bet we could agree on that too, and simultaneously, I bet we can agree on secure borders. Of course we need secure borders. Every nation needs secure borders. But we need to have a better system of allowing people welcoming people, allowing them, assimilating them, giving them a fresh start. Because I don't know about you, but if a man brought his family 1,000 miles through crime-ridden country, and then risked going over the border and kept his family intact with the faith of having an American dream where his kids can be safe and educated and he can get a job and work hard, those are the kind of people we want.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I have on my on-air program at KPFT, I've noticed based on the calls that are coming in, quite a few conservative callers. And I'm talking about Trump voting conservative callers. And if you listen to the undertone, you actually hear exactly what you just said, right? These are people that are frustrated. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people in MAGA that are just bat, crazy. That's just who they are. But the fact of the matter is that the sum total of MAGA plus conservatives plus moderates plus liberals that share probably 80% of folks' stuff in common are the vast majority of this country. And you know how you know it, Tim? If I go to a Starbucks, I can have fun. And about 90% of the people in my area are red Trump voting Republicans. And the thing about it, though, is when we sit down and talk and we have serious conversations. I mean, I told one the other day, I said, you may not realize it now, but you have voted to hurt somebody like me and to some extent to yourself. And they don't see it. And believe it or not, because they don't see it, they get grace from me. Because if they saw it and still did it, that would be offensive to me. But if they did it not being aware, just not seeing it, I think like I would want grace out of someone for whatever mistakes that I have and would have made. I think it's something that I, if I'm going to be a peacemaker and bringing people together, something that we have to do. Your thoughts?
I think the Socratic method would apply in this case.
You're going to use these big words on me now with the Socratic method. And what's the Socratic method?
that means you get you present the answer by asking the right question.
There you go. Got it.
Okay. And so rather than say, you're wrong about deporting all the undocumented aliens, or whatever the correct phrase is, you're wrong. That's confrontational. Mm-hmm. It would be better to say, well, how do you think we would build homes? How do you think we will harvest crops? What happens to the housing market if all of a sudden you take out 2% of the 2% of the shelters become vacant? That kind of thing, and that provokes the thought, because they are forced to think of the answer rather than sit here being demonstrative. Yield and just ask questions and tease out their thoughts. And then that would be the Socratic method.
Well, I appreciate you promoting my how to talk to your right-wing relative friends and neighbors. I didn't know what I did was a Socratic method, but I actually said, in that book, I spoke about asking more, listening, and also asking a lot of questions. And in that book, I told a story about a woman that I spoke to at Starbucks, where I kept on asking her, what would you do if this? What would you do if that? And, wouldn't it be nice if this? Wouldn't it be nice? And by the end of the conversation, she was all into Medicare for all without knowing it. And I felt guilty and said, ma'am, I just have to tell you, I'm really a progressive left-wing kind of guy. And she looked at me and said, Egberto, she didn't call me by name, but said with shock, but you're so nice. All I did was ask questions. Yeah. And so, I mean, that Socrates method, I didn't take philosophy in college. So,
I think I failed it once or twice. I don't know. So,
that was a good one. That was a good one.
If you fail it enough, some of it's bound to stick. It's like I often tell people, the 7 years in middle school were the best years of my life. So, man. But yeah, it's there's ways to do things, and that's part of your listeners. I believe they understand it, and that's why they listen to you. But to take it out and can you have that Christmas dinner with the crazy uncle? And yeah, you probably could let them talk. And but by using questions, you can direct the conversation. And usually it comes to a crashing illogic, and the person who is making these pronouncements gets it. What would be the phrase? The give them enough rope to hang themselves.
Or reductio ad absurdum. I don't know if you ever heard that term.
No.
It's called reductio ad absurdum. Is this thing where you don't really have the evidence, but you show that all the other possibilities are so alien to possible that the only solution is the one that you're actually talking about.
I think that was the Sherlock Holmes method.
Oh, okay.
Get rid of everything that's impossible, and the only thing that's left is the possible.
Exactly. But so let me ask you this then: what are you? I mean, look, you're a businessman. The truth of the matter is, for guys like you, a Trump presidency doesn't really ill serve you, but at the same time, you've always wanted to do what's right in the aggregate, not just for the few. What are your thoughts on, how we move from here?
Well, first of all, you call me a businessman, and I do have a business, but I really want to take care of my employees. I should be retired, but I feel like I have all these families I need to.
Can I interrupt you a second there? Because, and let me tell you why I want to interrupt you. Everybody that listens to me call me an anti-capitalist, and by the definition of capitalism, and you and I have had this discussion, it may be a fair argument. I'm a free enterpriser. I put some distinctions on that. But when people ask me about the business model that I would follow for small businesses, etc., you are the model, right? Because you take care of your employee, you make sure they have what they need, and these are the things we're talking about. The other things that I've talked about in the system, in the free enterprise system that I'm talking about, had to do with the collective, meaning corporations owned by the employees, or we have the business person who, through the laws, follow the rules of how you have a business, or as well, major big projects, in my opinion, should be done by the private sector. But that's just my thoughts. But what I wanted to say is that the policies that I stand for, with what Mr. Tim Danahey, as a businessman and a good organizer, that is the type of businesses that you would always see me support. Continue, my brother.
Well, using a model, I always say I aspire to have the Lincoln Electric model, and you can look it up in the Google machine. Lincoln Electric in Cleveland has a wonderful model, but it's like we work with unions, we deal with the prevailing wages. I want my employees to make as much as I can get for them, because if I mark it up 10%, I make more. Yes. Just as a concept.
Yes.
You try and take care of them, because what many companies don't realize is that 20% of their annual payroll is training. If I don't have the turnover, I save that and can give it to them and have some for myself. If the employees understand good work, I don't need a marketing department. 20% of my administrative overhead I don't need, because I don't need to market. Our word of mouth and repeat customers sells themselves, because my employees are trained and do a good job. And so there's a lot of things that and you do it for the long haul. It's not a quick kill. You always work for justice. And, if I tell a customer I need to charge you more, I explain why, and they do it. They understand it. It's not an adversarial relationship between management and labor, nor is it an adversarial or a predatory relationship between me and my customers, where we all look for advantages. It is a cooperative effort all the way through, so everyone can prosper. It's not one at the expense of the others. It's we do better when we work together.
And I want to add to that, Tim, because you have an interaction with your customer and your employee, and there's trust built within. They need something done, and you provide that service. One of the issues I have with the corporations today and the market, the what they like to call the free market system isn't free, is that there is that abstraction away from those who do the labor and those who are in need of the labor, those who need the products and those who produce the products. We have this entire layer in Wall Street that simply look at pieces of paper and exchange these pieces of paper and look at the customer, the provider of labor, the manufacturer, as simply cogs in a system. There's no relationship of trust. There's just a numerical value as to moving a stock, not having a stock. And those are the kinds of issues within the economic system that I say makes it operate exactly as it was intended to. And when I look at your business, when I look at collectives, you gave an example of, I think, what was similar to a collective with Edison. There is Madrigal.
Lincoln Electric.
Lincoln Electric. There is also Madrigal in Portugal. On these sort, we're not talking about everything being the same. Yours is a customer, employer, employee relationship, that symbiotic relationship. A collective is together we are building a product or whatever. But what we have today so often, there's an abstraction layer between those providing the service and products, and that allows, in my opinion, for the corruption of the economic system.
Whenever I look at a company, Staples. I bet Staples has a few of them have closed in your hometown. We've lost probably 2/3, 3/4 here, but the Staples model, Mitt Romney's model, and Mitt Romney seems reasonable in this day and age. But I don't agree with that model,
right?
Insofar as you take a company and you buy it with debt, you load the company up with debt, you do all the cost cutting and laying people off and the quality of products in order to be able to service that debt, and then you sell it and say goodbye, and so that is an all too prevalent model. And Big Lots, I think, is going through that now, where private equity wanted to buy it. If we thought about it, we could think of many more. And it's just not a viable long-term thing. If your objective is to take advantage of people in order to buy your $750 million yacht and build your bunker in Hawaii, so be it. And if algorithms that you create cause you to make money off of divisiveness and hate, so you can have a bunker and own an island in Hawaii and have a $1 billion yacht, that's for them. Doesn't mean I'm not even on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. It's just stuff in the media, you need to get your name out there. That is the way to do it right now. But you don't have to participate in the hate.
Interestingly, yeah, you're right. In the media, you have to be on every platform. In fact, one of the things that I'm putting out for my newsletter today, I'm actually sending a solicitation out where I'm talking about we are streaming everywhere now with the expectation that we can get all eyes. In fact, this is going to be streamed, my dear brother, over Twitter, over Instagram, over Telegram, Twitch, LinkedIn, everywhere it's going to be included on air on the Pacifica network. But the reason we have to do that is that the market of reaching people's eyeballs and ears is so segmented, and you have to try to reach them all with the message. You have to be there. Now, one of the things you brought up, Mitt Romney's type companies that buy these companies, gut them out and let it out. One of the things that we're going to have in effect now is a laissez-faire type, even more laissez-faire type capitalism that does that kind of a thing, because that's by definition what it. If you take a look at the definition of, well, the efficient allocation of resources, which I always say, look at healthcare. I don't know how efficient the allocation of resources is in that regards, but when you take a look at the lack of regulations and all of that we are having upcoming, the only people that are going to pay the price are those without capital and those that are just peons in these companies. And that is why it's going to be so necessary for our voices to be out there. But let me tell you, importantly, your voice, I know you're an organizer, I know you're a good person, but more importantly, somebody like you, your voice has to be prominently out there because, one, you're a business person. Two, you have employees and you served them well with your customers. And people need to understand that much of what what I call the oligarchy is saying there, to tell Americans that you need to forego of an honest economy. You have to forego of paying a living wage. You have to forego of all these things because business just won't work. We need you as a catalyst to that type of a messaging.
Well, you're very kind, but it just, people need to understand it makes sense if you're in it for the long haul. If you're looking for the quick kill, you're not going to make it. You have to develop relationships. People are better when they work together. It's just that simple. There's nothing radical there. And I think that at that Starbucks with whomever you may be speaking from the MAGA crowd or whatever, I bet they would be willing to acknowledge that too. There's a huge dissatisfaction. Let me just kind of, you notice something, Egberto. It doesn't matter the system. It can be a plutocracy. It can be a dictatorship. It could be communism. Pick any construct you want. But the wealth wants to consolidate to the 2%. Mm-hmm. And if you go back in history and you look at the different cultures, whether it be Roman or Aztec or Mayan or French before the Revolution, I mean, it just coalesced the 2%. What makes society greater is the legislation and the rules and the sense of fairness that allows that wealth to be distributed out, not equally. That will not work. Marxism will not work. However, there needs to be discrepancies in income, but not this much. And
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Already, the University of Paris has said that the wealth separation in the United States right now is worse than the time of Les Miserables. And I just saw the statistic the other day about the percentage of GDP, and we're somewhere between Les Miserables and Louis XV. So it's going in a wrong direction. And we may be thankful, Egberto, that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and all of these people who have made the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, they are shining a light on themselves from all of us that look at them and just say, what's going on here? Does this president serve us or does he serve them? Is it pay to play? And if it's pay to play, I don't know about you, but I would get angry and I would be inclined to go to town halls. I would be inclined to not buy a Tesla. I wish I could get away from Amazon, but they have become a utility in essence.
Exactly.
And so we need antitrust enforcement. We need. We can't let the inmates run the asylum.
And that is so true as the inmates running the asylum. And I think you hit the nail on something with regards to let the light shine on what's going on in Mar-a-Lago right now and who are the folks that are going out there. But in shining the light, we have to make sure that we have those who are willing to shine the light. And that's where I think we started the discussion as far as independent media doing that, because even as you've stated, right now, the mainstream media is not the fourth estate, but has to be cudgeled into doing it, as you pointed out. With, if you want to see the reaction from the companies, send the letters to the companies react, and then that moves down the line. Shouldn't work that way. I mean, we should have the mainstream media. Yes, the people should be able to control the corporations, but as well, they should be able to have faith that the media will report what both the corporation, governments, or anybody is doing out of the norms of how society was designed to operate. Before we go, what's my last questions all of the times? What should we be covering that we're not covering? Wait, two questions though. What should we be covering? What should Politics Done Right be covering that you see us maybe not covering enough? And I'm saying, speak as a businessman, speak as an average American citizen, speak as somebody who has a family. And the second thing, what should I have asked you that I didn't?
What I would like to see more in the media, and this is me, and may not be mass appeal. Thoreau said it's the province of the historian not to tell us what was, but to tell us what is. Mm-hmm. And so much of what happens has happened before. And if we can learn that lesson, whether it be Elon Musk influencing the president as compared to the American Liberty League in the 1930s, whether it be Luigi Mangione compared to John Brown in the 1850s, whether it be the Gilded Age of the 1890s and Teddy Roosevelt stepping in. Who was the next Teddy Roosevelt? What was the response after John Brown? How did American Liberty League fail? There's lessons out there that we can develop a plan of action to say, hey, this worked. And I would like to see more of that in the media. And if I were to say, Egberto, is there a question that you should have asked? It would be fun to go through a list. Two things I would say. I would love to go through a list of what we have in common. Not you and me, but necessarily what we perceive many Americans have. That would be, what do we have in common?
That's your platform, would be one brother.
Thing. Yeah. And platform. Then the other one, I don't know if you, there was a PBS show at one time called Connections, and there was a book written called The Axe Maker's Gift. And it talks about the connections. And it would be a fun exercise to say home ownership is nearly impossible for whatever the current generation, whatever the description is. It's Z, millennial, whatever.
Gen Z and millennials are having problems.
And it would be an interesting exercise to go through the connections. Well, why? Well, follow it through. Find out, wait a minute, the bankers, mm-hmm. How many major construction companies are there? What is the, is there restraint of trade, the suppliers, that kind of thing. It would be fun to have a discussion with your listeners and just say, what are your thoughts? Food. Robert F. Kennedy, I'm not wild about the man. Let me take it back. Marianne Williamson, when she ran for president mm-hmm. a bunch of years ago, they're all talking about healthcare. And she was the only one who said, we need to have a discussion. Why are Americans so sick?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We need to make the connections, follow
Right.
the thought through, and it would be an interesting exercise. And then perhaps we say, after we follow the thought through, we say, what can we do about it?
Right.
And so mainstream media will not allow that. The discussion, the forum, the introductions of multiple ideas will not take place because it is a directed medium. But people like you, with the courage to be able to listen to voices and to synthesize that into a process where you can say, let's think it through, people. And what do we have? I think we'd all be richer for it.
Well, Tim, you mentioned that you had that question about what do we have in common. So I'm going to let you close her out with telling our audience, what do we have in common, Tim?
What we have in common is that we all want to raise our families in peace. We all want to have choices. We all want to learn. We all want to feel safe. We all want programs. We all want answers to why is privatization better than public schools? Why are corporate jails better than public? I want the freedom to ask why and to get answers. I think many people do. I would like to have the opportunity to climb the economic ladder. The rungs are further apart. I would like to have the same interest rates that the big corporations have. I would like to make education affordable again or free. And if not free, then why can't the Fed have a student loan program at 0.25% instead of having it go to the bankers at predatory rates? I want answers. Don't we all want answers to these really simple questions that are glossed over? And we'll talk about the squirrel on water skis after the next commercial break. And that's what we're getting. So, Egberto, somehow you, somehow me, somehow someone, we need to follow the thought through. And then once we do that, perhaps we can come up with ideas to correct it.
Tim Danahey from the formerly and hopefully revived sometime, the Tim Danahey Show. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Always a pleasure.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.